Hello, today we're installing Ricochet armor on a Yamaha YXZ1000. With most Ricochet armor sets, you're going to start off by removing all of the factory plastic. This machine is kind of an exception. You are going to leave the stock floorboards in place. So, we usually start front to rear, so that's where we're going to start. So you'll take your top piece here, get your hardware set up, and on this one I actually like to start from the top. So you'll just set the plate into position. I'm just going to start both the bolts. To get one started, you can let it hang. And go ahead and get the other one started. Okay, so there we go there. Next, we're going to move back to the clamps. So we'll start with those. With all of our hardware, we have a self-locking nut built into the hardware, and you really want to put anti-seize on that. A little dab of anti-seize. And on this side, it's a little easier to get the clamp into position and then bring the plate up. And when you bring the plate up, you kind of have to watch out for this floorboard plastic. The plate actually needs to tuck behind it. So it helps if you kind of only have one bolt. I have this center one holding this floorboard on this side. Have all the rear ones, the rear bolts are still in. I've taken out this bolt, the side bolts, and the rear bolt. And that just allows it to move around so you can get everything lined up and into position. So line up your clamp and start the bolt. And again, we're just going to leave everything loose for now. You also have to get around this floorboard too. So that top plate, this guy here needs to tuck in behind these floorboards. So like I say, it's good to have pretty much all the bolts out except for maybe just one to hold it in place. We'll go ahead and put the clamp on the other side. And then we still have another clamp. It's the B clamp, the bigger of the two. It goes in the rear. And if you already have all this off, you can actually, it's easier just to reach up behind, or you can use the access hole. And again, we're just going to start it. Okay. We still have two more bolts here, but we're going to leave those out because the next piece is a common mount with that. Okay, so for this next plate, you're going to take it and it's going to slide underneath. Okay, before we get there, you're going to have some U-clips or body clips. It's a 6mm clip. They're already installed on this, but they need to be installed onto the floorboard. You'll slide them over and just kind of roughly center it up with the hole. They will be picked up by these just to retain the plastic. So you want to do that before you get the plates mounted, to slide these U-clips on. Like I say, they're already on this machine. They kind of lock themselves in place, so I don't really want to remove it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll just slide that over the plastic, and that actually gives you a threaded nut. There'll be a countersunk bolt that'll pick up the plastic to retain it. So do that, and then there's 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can install the next plate down. The M1 plate is the part number on that. And I'm just going to get it roughly in position. And it's going to be the longest of the spacers. You have 3 different lengths of spacers on this one. It's going to be the longest one. Goes in the center. It's easiest just to start that one first. Just get it finger tight. That way the plate can just hang. Okay. So that's on there good. So now we can go back and install these 2 mounts here. And again, this is why we leave everything nice and loose. So you can adjust it, get everything lined up. And I'm not going to tighten that. I'm just going to get it lined up so it'll stay in position. Okay, so we're good to go there. You want to do the clamps next. 2 of those. Again, you're going to put anti-seize on any of the hardware that we provide, the clamps or the nut plates. anything that has that self-locking feature. Here, there's a little bit of a bent hose. You want to make sure you get around that. You don't pinch it or anything like that. You're going to put the clamp through the access hole, and then you can feel it when you get around the bar of the frame. You wrap around the bar, line it up with the hole, and start the bolt. So I'm going to washer my anti-seize. And again, through the hole, around the frame tube. Line it up with the slot and start the bolt. Okay, the next three mounts, again, are a common mount, same as the front, so we need to put that plate on next before we install these three mounts. Okay, so working our way back here, we can install this plate, again, leaving these bolts out as they're a common mount. This plate will slide underneath, just like as we did earlier. If you have the plastic option, these nut inserts might hang you up, and you just have to, since everything's loose, you can just pry the plate down. We have 3 spacers for this plate. They're all the same, so it's usually easiest to find a thread. There we go. Let's start with this, kind of the center one back here. Again, you're just going to get it loose. These 2 are common with the rear, so we're going to set those aside for now, and we're going to pick up the 3 fronts that are also common mounts. I mixed up my hardware. Try not to do that. It can get interesting if you do. One more here. A lot of the time the trickiest part is finding the thread. Just get it to grab, you're usually okay. Okay. We have 2 clamps for this plate as well. Again, we're going to apply anti-seize. It's really probably not bad practice to apply anti-seize to all the bolts, but you especially want to apply it to the hardware we provide. So this, you can either come up from the side here, which is usually easier, or use the access hole. And again, just line it up and get the bolt started loosely. On this side, you have to use the access hole because there's a weldment for the engine mount in the way, but you can come in from the side to help get it in position. And we're ready to move on to the rear piece. The rear piece uses 2 bolts for the rear mounts here. These nut plates and bolts for these mounts here, and then these are for the common mount. So we're going to start with the nut plates just to get it into position and hang the plate. And again, this will slide underneath. Okay, once you get it there, it almost hangs there by itself. You can reach over the top of the frame here with the nut plate and just line it up with the hole, and then go ahead and start your bolt. We'll do that with the other side. And go ahead and start our common mounts here. Kind of get the holes lined up as best you can. So finding the holes sometimes the hardest. Okay, now we have the 2 rear mounts, and it's actually a lot easier to get to those. So I'm going to lower the machine to do that one. You won't be able to see it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So again, you just come back here and line up the holes and start the bolts. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Okay, once we're started, we'll go ahead and raise the machine back up. Okay, from here we can actually start tightening things. Again, working from front to rear is usually best. So, actually I'm going to tighten these first, since they're all nice and lined up. Okay, now we can go ahead and tighten our clamps. These are a T40. It helps you kind of get your hand in there just to help hold it in place until it gets some tension on it. Right? All of our washers look like they're pretty well lined up. In fact, I tighten those first. It's usually best to tighten the cup washers just to make sure they seat correctly before you tighten the clamps. And we'll just move our way back and tighten the rest of the cup washers. And we'll tighten the rest of the clamps. Again, it's best to hold the clamp until you get some tension on it. Once you have some tension on it, it will move on you. Make sure the clamp stays seated. Sometimes they can rotate, but usually not a problem. These two back here. Okay, so that takes care of our clamps. We do have the two nut plates still. And you need to get a wrench on those, otherwise they'll just spin on you. But you can just reach up into here. Relatively easy. It's a little tight on the engine side. Just get a wrench on the flat of the nut. This side's a little easier, a little bit more room to work. And then you have the two rear bolts. And again, you want to make sure the plate's in position. You can see it's got a little bit of a tension to it, so just slide it up and tighten the bolts.
Okay. That takes care of the belly skid. Now you want to go through. And put in these flathead bolts, floorboard plastic.
Okay, and these are just tying in the plastic. We put those body clips of the U-nuts in there prior to installing this plate. And so they should be pretty close if they're not lined up. You just kind of get a screwdriver or something in there and work them into position so they can catch the thread. Yes, here I'm just using an Allen wrench. Just gonna try and work that plastic over so I can get this started. And we'll go ahead and tighten these. They don't need to be super tight. It's nothing structural. It's just to tie the plastic in. So just a hair over snug. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now over here, to get this plate in position, you need to remove these three bolts on this plastic here. Like I say, really only the rear bolts can stay, and then pretty much you just want to have one front bolt. So we can go ahead and reinstall those bolts at this time. And you'll just reuse the factory bolts in this location. Sometimes with this middle one, you might have to get the other two sunk down to pull it in to get that one started. It'll be a little difficult to get to grab, but it'll go. And then there's also a mount inside the footwell that I've also pulled out, so I'm going to reinstall that as well now too. And then we can go ahead and tighten all three of those down. If I can find my ratchet. There it is. So there's one here, second one here, third one here, and then there's the one that's accessible through the passenger footwell. And then yes, on the driver's side, you don't really need to remove that one. Okay, now we're ready to install the floorboard skids. And like I said earlier, they're going to go directly over this plastic. Okay, so now we're ready for the floorboard installation. We're going to start off probably the front. This one's actually a little easier to start with, but that's the only bolt I have in there. So we're going to start with the front. It's the shortest spacer of the bunch. And then we're going to I'll do the rear one, which is the second shortest spacer, since I have those bolts already out. I have to kind of push the plate up to get the bolt started. Okay, so now that I have the first bolt started, you can go ahead and remove the second one. The factory bolt that's holding the floorboard on. Get rid of that. And it's the 1-inch spacer that goes there. Get that one started. And then it's the second shortest spacer in the very rear. Not a big deal. All you gotta do is that. Just get it off the plate. And get your bolt started. Then the two longest spacers mount on the sides. Okay, so everything's started, and we can go ahead and just tighten all those down. That takes care of that. And we move on to the other side. The other side's pretty much the same thing. There's just one extra mount that also uses a U-clip, a body clip, or U-nut, or a body clip, or whatever you want to call it, in this location right here. Other than that, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Your two longest spacers on the sides, two shortest ones up front. And that's that. That's for the rear there. It's the same for left and right. It just leaves us with the front. The front just utilizes our clamps. As before, you're going to want to put some anti-seize on those. Putting the plate up into position. And it's best to start a front clamp first. Turn it up and get it started. And then you can just let it hang. If you start a rear one, it's just going to fall off and probably hit you in the head. And again, these the front plastic guards come off as well with these. Get the skid plate roughly in position, and just get one kind of snug so it doesn't move on you. And what you want to do from here is to check the clearance. So you want to, we're all the way out here. There's clearance behind the boot. Bring it all the way in. Make sure the caliper clears. It does. It's a little tight, but and especially if you're all the way up here, that's as close as it's ever going to get. So if you have clearance here, you're good to go. And we do. So from there, I can go ahead and just tighten the rest of the plate. Okay, after you get it tight, you want to double check your clearance. And that seems good. Okay. So that is the Ricochet aluminum armor skid plate installation. Thank you.